Today we are going to recognize our 39th recipient of the Exemplary Elected Official Award, former West Palm Beach Mayor Joel Daves. Let me tell you a little bit about Joel. He was born in Atlanta, Georgia in 1928. As a 10-year-old child in 1938, he moved to West Palm Beach. Joel will celebrate his 90th birthday this July. I've had the honor of knowing and admiring Joel for all of my adult life, and speaking with him many times in the past and in advance of today. He recounted his many fond memories of growing up in West Palm Beach, playing football, fishing, driving old cars, and participating in Eagle Scout Troop 13, which met at the Memorial Presbyterian Church not far from here. He graduated from Palm Beach High School in 1946, which is now Dreyfus School of the Arts, next door to where you're seated this afternoon. After high school, Joel attended the University of the South in Swanee, Tennessee. He returned to the state of Florida to attend law school at the University of Florida, where he was editor of the Law Review and graduated with high honors. He then joined the Marine Corps, where he trained in Quantico for Officer Candidate School, Semper Fi, Joel, and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps. He served a little more than 2 years on active duty. Then he returned to his hometown of West Palm Beach, and he joined the Marine Corps Reserve Unit, and later served as the commanding officer of that Marine Corps Reserve Unit in 1969 and 1970. He retired with the rank of Major. In 1959, then Governor Leroy Collins appointed Joel to serve out the unexpired term of Chuck Nugent as our Palm Beach County Solicitor. For those of you unfamiliar with the office of County Solicitor, it was the chief prosecutor at that time. The County Solicitor handled all crimes, misdemeanors, and felonies that were not capital crimes. The capital crimes were left to the state attorney. Of course, today we only have a state attorney who handles all of the crimes, and the office of County Solicitor has been done away with. Well, during his term as County Solicitor, he handled all sorts of prosecutions personally. He personally prosecuted corrupt police chiefs, sheriffs, and ordinary citizens who had committed crimes. He was reelected to the office when he ran and served a total of 5.5 years as our county solicitor until 1964. In that same year, 1964, Joel was elected to the Florida House of Representatives, where he was named Freshman Legislator of the Year. He served only one term in the Florida House before the Republican wave that swept Claude Kirk into the governor's mansion also swept a lot of people out of the legislature, and that returned Joel home to West Palm Beach. In 1970, while he was still serving as the commanding officer of the Marine Corps Reserve Unit, he decided to run for the United States Senate. His conscience called him to do that. He was sick of the war in Vietnam, and he was sick of his fellow Marines that he had trained with being killed. So he decided to run for U.S. Senate. He came in last place in a field of 5 candidates in a primary, so he retired from politics. He then spent the next 2 decades practicing law in West Palm Beach and being an active community leader in non-elected capacities. Then in 1991, Joel was again frustrated by something, and that something was his hometown, West Palm Beach, was not in good condition. For those of you that were here at the time, you remember that downtown emptied out at 5 p.m. We had rampant crime and poverty in our downtown, and Joel decided to do something about it. So in November of 1991, after the citizens of West Palm Beach approved an amendment to the city charter that provided for the election of a full-time, strong mayor for the first time, Joel ran for that office. He lost to Nancy Graham. However, Joel wanted to help his hometown, so the following spring in March, he ran for the city commission. He won, and he won re-election 3 times afterwards. He served on the city commission until 1999, when he was elected strong mayor of West Palm Beach, succeeding Nancy Graham. Under Joel's leadership, the downtown came to life, City Place opened, and our parks were revitalized. Good times had returned to West Palm Beach, thanks in part to Joel's hard work. Then he retired from politics for good. So Joel Daves has seen many elections in his years of public service, 11 to be exact. He won 6 and lost 5. However, he was never afraid to get in the arena and risk defeat to pursue causes that he believed in. As Teddy Roosevelt so eloquently stated it, quote, "The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, not to the cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." Joel Daves is no doubt one of the men that President Roosevelt was referring to. What I have always admired most about Joel, though, is that he leads a complete life, not just a life of politics. He's an outdoorsman. He's a musician who had his own bluegrass band that traveled the state of Florida playing at folk festivals. He's a great fisherman. He even drove across the country 3 times in his old beat-up VW van, living out of it. For those of you in the room familiar with the annual duck dinner, it started in Joel's side yard of his beautiful historic home in the 600 block of Avernia Street many years ago with just a handful of family and friends. Today it is attended by over 1,000 people and held in Dreer Park each year. Another distinction that I've always found interesting about Joel is he holds the distinction of being one of the few surviving members of the Jetty Conks. And very few people in this room will know what a Jetty Conk is, so I will tell you. Probably only the old timers would know, but it was a loose and very motley group of men, if you knew them, that used to stop working, quit their jobs in September, and go to the Palm Beach Inlet and fish for snook during the Great Mullet Run each autumn. At the end of the mullet season, they would hold a bash on Peanut Island called the Conk Out, where the only order of business was to elect a new King Conk to preside over the affairs of the organization for the coming year. Of course, Joel is a past King Conk. Joel Daves is a Renaissance man. He's a scholar, a lawyer, a Marine Corps officer, musician, fisherman, outdoorsman, public servant, and most of all, a true gentleman. Regardless of which side of the political spectrum you come from, and whether you supported him or voted against him, everyone liked and respected Joel Daves. He is a consummate gentleman who only sought elected office to serve us, not to serve himself. He is the ideal example of an exemplary elected official. Today, Joel is accompanied by his wife, Darden, his son, Joel IV, who currently serves on the City Commission of Mobile, Alabama, his son, Christian, his daughter, Posey, and daughters-in-law, Stephanie and Samantha. His family has traveled from near and far to be with him today as we recognize his significant contributions to our community. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in honoring the Forum Club's 2017-2018 Exemplary Elected Official Award recipient, Mr. Joel Daves. Let's do the photo.
It was marvelous, absolutely marvelous. Thank you so much. Last week there was a story in the newspaper, the Post, about this meeting and about Mr. Putnam coming to attend and speak. And I think the story said that this club, this Forum Club, was 40 years old. Actually, this club is in its 42nd year. And over those years, this club has furnished a venue and a pulpit for public officials, politicians, would-be public officials, senators, congressmen, and women, governors, federal government officials, one sitting President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, an assortment of other outstanding speakers. And I've been to a number of those meetings. And in this process, the Forum Club has been a beacon, shedding light in what is often a murky kind of political landscape. And I'm proud to be here today. I'm absolutely, enthralled at this award, which is totally undeserved, but I accept it with grace, I hope, and certainly with humility, and my family has come here to be with me. We all appreciate this very much, and we want to thank the Forum Club, the directors, Harvey, and the others, and anyone who had a part in this. And thank you so much, and for allowing us to be here and to play a small, perhaps small role in this great tradition of this club. Thank you again.
Wow, that was terrific. It's now my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce Florida Republican gubernatorial candidate Adam Putnam. A fifth-generation Floridian, former congressman and state representative, Adam Putnam has served as Florida's Commissioner of Agriculture for the past 8 years. Under his leadership, Florida is first in nation for Americans to exercise their Second Amendment rights, as he has worked to cut the cost of a concealed weapons license, multiplied the locations where Floridians can obtain a license, and expedited applications for active military and veterans. He also created Operation Freedom to honor the men and women who have fought to defend our freedoms by providing opportunities for wounded veterans to enjoy Florida's great outdoors at no cost to them. Commissioner Putnam fought the Obama administration's efforts to impose unnecessary and costly regulations on Florida's water bodies and opposed the administration's attempt to expand Medicaid in Florida. He has also defended Florida's farmers against unfair Mexican trade policies that were putting Florida's businesses out of business. So without further ado, if our moderator, WPTV's Michael Williams, is ready, we will ask both he and Commissioner Putnam to take the stage.
Thank you, Tony. Sure. Thank you very much, and it's a treat to be with everyone. Mr. Daves, where did our award winner go? Mr. Daves, I have had the honor of being the Grand Marshal of the Swamp Cabbage Parade in LaBelle. I have the distinction of being a champion sweet corn shucker at the Sweet Corn Fiesta here in Palm Beach County. But I can only aspire to be King Conk. Thank you for your service and congratulations on everything that you've done for our community and for our state. I'm Adam Putnam, and it's a treat to be with you. I'm from a little town in the middle of the state called Bartow, which most people don't know where it is, but everyone in this room probably does, because when you get off the turnpike at Yeehaw, you have to go through Bartow on Highway 60 to get to Tampa. Now, I don't know why you would rather go to Tampa than be in Bartow, but if you ever want to stop, I'd be happy to greet you. I am a fifth-generation Floridian. I'm a small business owner, a farmer, and my family has been in the citrus and cattle business for 5 generations. And I hope that my children, that some portion of them in the 6th generation, will also choose to be a part of Florida's third leg of our economy, which is feeding the world, particularly during the times of the year when nobody else has the weather that allows that to happen. I married a school teacher, a kindergarten teacher, who was an Air Force brat. Melissa grew up all over the world. She was raised in Moscow and Garmisch and Guam and Monterey and Montgomery and Wright Pat. I like to say she saw the world and picked Bartow. We met at the University of Florida, and on our second date, she gave me a piece of the Berlin Wall that she had chiseled out herself because she was in high school when the wall came down and they turned all the students loose and sent them to the wall. And I thought, okay, I like the way this is going. I think this is going to end well if she's sharing this special piece of history with me. We have 4 children. I am humbled by the fact that I have 3 teenage girls, which is to say that every day they tell me how dumb I am. And I have a son who's in middle school, so we have 2 in high school and 2 in middle school in Florida's public schools. I'm a product of our public schools. And everything about that influences my view of public policy. When I say that I'm a 5th-generation Floridian, it doesn't mean that 5th-generation Floridians are better than 2nd-generation Floridians or any better than people who got here 10 minutes ago. It means that the decisions that I make in public life are rooted in what's the right long-term decision for our state. Not just a Band-Aid to get through a legislative session or to patch it up through a fiscal year, but what's the right trajectory for our state to make it stronger and to make it better. And it comes down to a few things. One, we have to maintain a strong pro-small business climate in Florida. Your county is the envy, not just of many counties in Florida, but many counties in the rest of the country. On the east, you're a global brand for world-class tourism, beaches, attractions, hospitality. You are home to one of the most expensive and beautiful hotels in all of America, and you think I'm talking about the Breakers. I'm talking about that $800 a night Hampton Inn during polo season in Wellington. I made that mistake only once. You are home to a robust and growing manufacturing base that's historical. It's been here and continues to grow and to thrive, and with Kelly Smallridge's help, you continue to attract new industries. And with Bill de Blasio and Rahm Emanuel's help, you continue to attract new jobs in the financial services sector, which we are happy to benefit from. A state that has a pro-small business climate is by definition good for all businesses, because if businesses know that taxes will be low, regulation will be minimal and predictable and consistent, then they can make investment decisions about what's the right thing and where should that capital be reallocated, and more often they are choosing Florida. We have to invest in our kids, in education. As I said, I'm a product of our public schools. My children are in public schools. My wife taught in the public schools. Our future competitiveness really is determined by the reading levels and the graduation rates and the success metrics coming out of the Raiders and the Gators, who are here representing Glades Day and Glades Central and all of the schools throughout Palm Beach County. That does matter. And something that I am most passionate about, that I look forward to your questions and to a deeper conversation, is this. Our school system has gotten out of balance. And while we have a number of options for the university-bound student, we are attempting to pressure 100% of our students into student loan debt for a degree they may not want and may not be able to use, to come home more broke and more liberal, with or without the degree, but without the marketable job skills to be successful. And I will restore vocational and technical and career training back into our middle schools and back into our high schools. And stop treating our state colleges like the red-headed stepchild, present company excluded. They're producing triple the number of diplomas as our university system. Now, make no mistake, I'm not pitting one against the other. We need world-class research universities in the 3rd largest state. And what President Kelly's doing at FAU in conjunction with Scripps and Max Planck is remarkable. But we also have to invest in rebuilding our middle class, our inner cities, and our rural communities, and that takes place in the state college system and through the technical skills and the technical schools. We need to let all of our students know what they could earn. They need to know what they could earn in any number of these jobs that welders and pipe fitters are making $100,000 a year. Guys, you know what you're paying to get your boat serviced every year. Your wife may not know, but you know that those are great jobs. The state that is the fishing capital of the world ought to build more boats here in Florida. The state that put a man on the moon ought to lead the way in the next generation of innovation and technology for the next giant leap for mankind, and we can do that. I'm not just talking about construction trades either. I'm talking about financial services. I'm talking about healthcare, aviation and aerospace, marine engineering. The #1 job vacancy in Florida every month for a decade has been nursing. Well, Palm Beach State ought to be able to take a high school senior who can graduate with a CNA and be able to go get a paycheck, not go get a student loan, top off their skills flexibly and affordably and close to home to get them into that RN, to get them into that BSN, so that we are creating opportunities so that our children don't have to leave Florida to find good jobs. And that's fundamental to my vision about restoring those skill sets to our education system. Our infrastructure, and particularly our water, it's our golden goose. Without water, we don't have agriculture. Without water, we can't accommodate future growth. Without water, we don't have world-class beaches and world-class tourism. Even if they're all on the turnpike during the same several weeks of the year and drives you crazy as a local, we're very proud of the fact that Florida has broken records each of the last 2 years in tourism. So we have to make sure that we get our water policy right, our water supply and our water quality. As someone who's a fifth-generation Floridian, I want my kids to be able to have the same experiences on our water bodies that I've had. Not only to be able to catch their first sail out in the Gulf Stream off Palm Beach or chase that mullet run or pull a snook out of one of our estuaries, but to be able to catch that big bass out of Lake Okeechobee, to tube down the Itchtucknee in one of our 43 first magnitude spring-fed rivers in North Florida. Those are the things that make Florida, Florida. And we have to save the next generation from the opioid crisis. And I want to thank your local leadership, Commissioner, Mayor now, McKinley and Kerner and your state attorney, Dave Ehrenberg, who've helped me better understand the opioid crisis and our sober home crisis, not only here locally, but its impacts throughout the state. And I will tell you something absolutely frightening. Here in Palm Beach County was the first place I heard this statistic, but again in Duval and again in Sarasota and in every place where I've had a roundtable with law enforcement, the FOP, local officials about the opioid crisis, our healthcare professionals, in every situation, they have said that they have had to add staff to the medical examiner's office and add space to the morgue. What does that say about the devastation that the opioid crisis is wreaking across our state, not just in your backyard, but everywhere in Florida? We have to work together to save the next generation from this scourge. We know that we live in a state people save all year to visit. And they come down here and they're so excited and they bring their families, their children. Their children are so excited and it makes such an impression on them to be in Florida for just a few days that those kids bring their own kids back a generation later to try to recreate those same memories and experiences that were so powerful for them as a child. We know that we live in a state that people spend a lifetime trying to figure out how to get here. I mean, how many people in Cook County are listed as being Palm Beach County residents for 6 months and a day? Even now, on the doorstep of the month of May, some poor schmuck is still shoveling snow somewhere in America, dreaming about being in Florida. We know that they view Florida as a prize, as a reward for a life well lived someplace else after they've raised their kids, after they've sold their home, after they've sold their business. That's not enough. Ladies and gentlemen of the Forum Club, you and I working together, implementing this vision for a stronger, better Florida, investing in our education, improving our workforce development, being a business-friendly state. We don't have to simply settle for being the prize for a life well lived someplace else. We can be the launch pad for the American dream so that we keep our brightest and best here and they don't move away to find a good job like they did when I graduated from the University of Florida and they went to Atlanta and Charlotte and Austin and Boston. We keep them in Wellington and Palm Beach Gardens and Fort Lauderdale and Pensacola and Jacksonville. We keep them in Florida and we become a magnet for talent from around the country, because they know that this is the place to raise their family. This is the place to start that business. This is the place to launch that new invention, like what's happening not too far down the road at Magic Leap. This is the place that will lead in innovation. This is the state that will define America's future in the 21st century. That's the Florida that I want to work with you to build and create. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you. Unemployment in Florida was double digits. The Wall Street Journal had written our obituary. They essentially called it the Sunset State, said tourism wouldn't come back, real estate would not recover. There was a 20-year glut of condos in Miami. They ought to go visit Miami now. So it hasn't always been the case, and we can't accept and be complacent that it will always be so. We are a global brand. We should leverage that. We have a diverse workforce. We have innovation. We have great universities. What we need to fill in that gap, though, is in the skilled labor force.
And I want to talk to you more about that. We spoke recently about that when you visited with us on To The Point on News Channel 5. But if we're part of a global brand, even as we speak right now, U.S. trade representatives are in China. The expectation is those talks may not end well. Many argue that President Trump is unfairly picking a trade war that business and agricultural executives in Florida worry will hurt the product that many of these people are pitching throughout the world. What would your message be to President Trump? Do you believe that he is unfairly picking a trade war that could hurt people in this room, their businesses? What would you say to him?
Well, I would say to President Trump and to Secretary Ross, who has the good sense to be a resident of Palm Beach County, thank you, because what you're doing is good for Florida agriculture, and I think ultimately will be good for Florida workers, American manufacturers, and American factories. We do have to negotiate in a very stern way. There are businesses on the verge of going out of business, and you have lost businesses in Palm Beach County because of unfair dumping, which is the sale of products below their cost of production, which is routine in agriculture, flooding in across the border, and we have not had an advocate to stand up for American jobs and American agriculture interests until President Trump and Secretary Ross. Our ports are job magnets, and Florida is a global brand for business. But we have to operate under fair trade agreements that are then also enforced. We have had neither under NAFTA.
In fact, Mr. Ross not invited on the China trip because his critics argue the president keeps flip-flopping on exactly what he wants out of the deal. Bottom line, do you worry that if we end up in a trade war, as many Wall Street Journal spoke about this concern, the New York Times and others, helps or hurts Florida in the next 6 months to a year and beyond if we end up with tariffs going back up against allies like Australia, like South Korea and the like? Where does it place Florida and some of the businessmen in this room?
So I trust that at the end of the day, they will negotiate a deal that is better for American interests. The deal that we currently have for Florida agriculture could not be any worse. There are routinely businesses that are selling out because they've had so many years of losing money on green beans here in the Glades, so many years of losing money on peppers, so many years of losing money on tomatoes. Ruskin, Florida used to be famous for tomatoes. There are very few to be found today. Homestead, South Dade, you can go all over the state, and Florida was sacrificed on the altar of a bad trade deal, and this president, I think, is in a position to correct that.
Before we move on to education, which you've spoken passionately at this forum and at others about, what would be the chief thing you'd insert in a trade bill to bolster the future for businessmen, agriculture executives in Florida?
You should be able to self-initiate an anti-dumping order. We should give states the standing to get in front of the quasi-judicial bodies who administer these trade agreements. Give them the ability to do that. Right now, you have to show harm across the country, so Floridians could be losing their shirts. Meanwhile, farmers in Arizona and California who have a lot of cross-border investment, they're not interested in signing on to that deal. And that has been what has cost us an awful lot of farms and an awful lot of jobs in Florida, and that's something we've been working very closely with the President's administration on.
Commissioner, you talked with me recently. You talked again passionately today about education, which is roughly a third of Florida's $87 billion budget. It consumes roughly a third of that budget. So
well, you know more than the Democrats knew in their debate.
So getting education right is crucially important, and you've talked about changing the components of how we do that and about the tech school, which got your biggest round of applause. Dig a little more deeply into specifically what you look to do, and will it mean more money for that budget or money we already have better and more wisely allocated?
Well, we spend about 28% of the budget on education. per pupil funding in Florida is about $7,400. And we spend separately from that about $400 million on workforce development. That includes not only student workforce development, but a lot of the retraining. Think about Career Source and things like that. First, to fix that and to make the investments, there's a couple of approaches. Number one, we have to destigmatize vocational and technical training. I mean, right now it's kind of viewed as a second-rate path. So I believe that there have to be stronger linkages between the K-12 system and our local state colleges. So think about all the options that a university-bound student has. They've got AP, advanced placement. They've got dual enrollment. You've got a lot of high school seniors who can graduate with their AA for free. I mean, mom and dad are done with half of college before they get their high school diploma. Now, why shouldn't the system similarly have a pathway for that student who wants to build boats, who wants to do plumbing or electrical, who wants to be a nurse, to be able to dual enroll, get their certification, and come out of high school with a CNA in nursing, with a welding certification? We should tear down the silly barriers that prevent students from having both an apprenticeship and getting academic credit. If they want to leave at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and get paid and get academic credit, let them do that.
And Commissioner, I remember those days when you
said
could
be
go
specific, and I was just on a roll.
I'm sure you could go on a roll for much more time than we'll even have today. But no, to dig a little more deeply into that topic, one of the complaints you'll sometimes hear is that we need an even stronger linkage in terms of internships. Before people are done with programs like you're suggesting, how would you improve the linkage between, say, that tech education, internship or apprentice opportunities with business? That's a complaint I hear, that it's not strong enough to let them hit the ground running on exactly the kind of things you're talking about. What more needs to be done there?
We've got to bring the employers in. We need to really recognize that it's not enough for the education system to crank out outputs based on what they think the workplace needs. We need to bring the employers in to say, what exactly are the skill sets that you're looking for? So you're training employees, you're not just educating a widget. And in doing so, it allows us to not only create that linkage for apprenticeships and internships, but it also guarantees that the graduates have the skill sets to immediately move in to the workplace and not have to leave to find that job. Let me give you a specific example. So I was in Tampa last week. I spoke to 1,000 high school seniors. I was competing with Cliff Clavin from Cheers, but none of the high school seniors knew who Cliff Clavin was. They only knew him from his voiceovers in the Pixar cartoons. That's how old we're all getting. But they do something called National Signing Day. It's hosted by the Associated Builders and Contractors. So just like if you were going to go sign up to go play quarterback or be a pitcher, and they have the balloons and the party in the gym, they do that for individuals to go through a career fair, interview with electrical, subs, plumbers, HVAC, fire control systems, a whole host of things, and they sign on the dotted line to get the apprenticeship, and they call it National Signing Day for those 1,000 seniors. Almost in every instance, those seniors at the end of that apprenticeship, which takes place the summer before their senior year, they now know there's a job waiting for them at the end of that senior year. And the employer is instilling the soft skills that all of us as employers, that you look for in your businesses, that are so difficult to find, that school's really not is the ideal place to instill in their mind. When you call, if you're not going to show up, call in sick. Be on time. Don't leave before your boss. You are home. If you are at work 3 days in a row, we're not going to give you a participation ribbon. So the employers have that linkage, and the students now have the light at the end of the rainbow, and there's another mentor there, because now that employer is saying, hey, I do need you to be able to read a set of prints. I do need for you to be able to understand a technical manual. I need you to finish strong in your English class your senior year. Now they've got another set of eyes encouraging them to be successful in school, and they know that there's a reward at the end of school in the form of a job.
A lot more money to kind of initiate a lot of the things you've talked about, and I know that's easy ask and a tough specific without rolling out the programs, but what are we looking at? Can it be accomplished in a current education budget as it exists in Florida right
Well,
now?
I do think we have to reorient the $400 million that's going into workforce development. Because not only, if we're going to meet the workforce needs of Florida, if you just simply run the numbers, it's not enough to meet the workforce needs on graduating seniors. We have to have a better retraining program for individuals whose jobs will be disrupted. So in a group like this, when you get a speaker in here and they talk about autonomous vehicles and changing technologies and all these kinds of things, it's pretty exciting. We all leave here fired up. If you're a cab driver, even if you're an Uber driver, it's a little scary because it means that now you've bet on a technology that may not be around in a decade, decade and a half, 2 decades. Nobody exactly knows. That workforce is going to have to be retrained. And I think a lot of that destigmatization, which I talked about, that's half the battle. That's where the Carolinas are beating us. They've destigmatized these types of careers. Tennessee's done it. Even Alabama, and I hate to give Alabama credit for anything. Even Alabama's doing better than us at this, and a lot of it revolves around the pride of bringing in those major employers. So when you have a Mercedes, a Boeing, that helps to change the culture, and we have to retrain our guidance counselors to let these kids know this is a valuable, viable, lucrative option. It's not just, oh, you're not cut out for university, so we're going to send you down the lesser path. It's not that at all.
And then create the loop where employers realize they're going to have that kind of workforce base that therefore attract them. I want to move to other topics. We talk on this all day long, and I can tell from the applause and the attention it is vital importance to many, but other topics we do.
But we've got twice as much time as we thought we'd have, so.
There you go. Parkland hangs heavy on the hearts here. The governor pushed hard for a gun and school safety bill. Your critics say that's a bill you would not have signed. True, and why not?
So our hearts are heavy for Parkland and for Pulse and for Ocala. As I said earlier, with 2 kids in high school and 2 kids in middle school in public schools, it hits home. It hits close to home. And I think the governor and the legislature deserve a ton of credit for moving rapidly, particularly on the 2 areas that I think are most important to keeping our kids safe. You've got to harden the schools. I mean, the school building at Bartow High School that my kids are in, the original wing is the same wing that their grandparents went to school in. It's a very open campus. We have to make changes to our campus layouts to restrict access, to make those improvements, to harden our schools, to prevent these types of tragedies in the future. And we're going to need more deputies. If you've got a high school like in Parkland that's got 4,000 students, it's going to take more than 1 school resource officer. So we have to, and what they did this year is not a single check the box, we're done, let's move on. This is going to be an ongoing process of how we continue to make our schools safer.
Would you repeal the part of it that raised the gun purchase age from 18 to 21? You did not support that.
I don't, but let me get to that. The most important thing I think we have to do is continue to address the mental illness component of this. The Parkland shooter should not have had a gun at 18, at 21, or at 51. He was a sick individual. He'd had 36 visits by local law enforcement. He'd been expelled for a weapons violation. He'd had 2 calls to the FBI, and he'd had DCF visit his home because of posting a comment on a YouTube video that said he wanted to be a professional school shooter. When I meet with local law enforcement, they say when they Baker Act someone, which we all think of as being 72 hours, they're out before the shift's over of the law enforcement officer who actually Baker Acted them. We have to get our arms around that because whether they're using a pistol, an assault rifle, a shotgun, you name it, we have to make our schools safer. And in my opinion, that's the most important step to keeping our kids and our teachers safe. Now,
and indeed,
I did disagree.
And indeed, the bill is moving towards trying to do more of what you're talking about. As you said, it's a work in progress, and if elected governor, may need more money and more work in that regard in terms of mental health. You did not disagree. As governor, would you try to work with lawmakers to repeal lifting the purchase age from 18 to 21?
I will enforce the law. But let's make no mistake that this is not, we're not done. We've got a ton more to do on mental health in our society. It influences the opioid crisis. It influences the inmate population in the county jail. The vast majority of inmates that Sheriff Bradshaw is managing are suffering from some type of mental illness. And ever since the nation made a shift in the 1960s, we have been disinvesting in mental health. And we're seeing this in people stepping in front of Brightline trains, in people acting and shooting up schools and other public places, in people driving their families off a cliff into the ocean. I mean, we are awash in a mental health crisis.
What do you say directly to the Parkland students who are part of a movement to try to ban assault weapons? What do you say directly to them?
Well, I've met with them. I've met with them in Tallahassee, and first and foremost, your heart goes out. They are my daughter's ages. My daughters who were just, they spent the weekend focusing on our raising money for the American Cancer Society with our walkathon, and have none of the same set of memories that those Parkland students have. It is, and I think all of us appreciate and respect what they've been through and the advocacy and the passion that they bring to that.
But you don't support what they want.
I don't support 100% of what they want.
You don't support the ban on assault weapons. So what do you say to them when they say to you, why not, Commissioner?
Well, because there are other weapons that have been used in school shootings. The struggle that people have with defining what an assault weapon is and making that stick in a court of law. I think ultimately our focus ought to be on hardening our schools, improving the school safety measures inside those schools, and getting not only the resources in terms of school resource officers, but the mental health resources to prevent these types of tragedies in the future.
And certainly the bill, and many argue that that is part and parcel of that, but the gun debate is going to be part and parcel of what you will be discussing on the trail for the next many
Without
months.
question, and just as I showed up on your TV show to discuss it in depth, I'm here to discuss it in depth. That's more than can be said for a lot of folks.
And we'll get to the person you're naming who's not here in a moment, because I'd like to know if he was sitting here what you would say to Congressman DeSantis, so we will get to that. You did receive some criticism. You've backed off from it. At one point, your support from the NRA is well known, and your support of the NRA is well known. At one point, pre-Parkland, you said in some literature, I'm an NRA sellout. Do you still stand by that, or do you regret that statement?
Well,
How would you nuance that statement post-Parkland?
As you said, it was pre-Parkland. It was like months pre-Parkland, and it was in a very different context. It was taking a newspaper column that called me an NRA sellout. Look, everybody, I think, recognizes, or they should recognize, and I think mostly everybody except portions of the media recognize that you can have law-abiding, responsible, safe firearms owners who like to hunt, they like to take their children hunting, they like to shoot, they like to collect. They can do all of those things in a safe, responsible way, and they are not, by definition, a criminal or a quack because they choose to participate in a heritage that's been in my family for 5 generations.
But even in
and I think people ought to separate those two things, that let's focus on the people who are abusing the Second Amendment, have serious mental health issues and should not be in possession of a firearm, and let's focus on keeping firearms out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them, rather than making the debate about people who have never had a problem at all and enjoy our outdoor heritage in this country and responsibly exercising their Second Amendment rights.
You talk. Just briefly, because there was a Quinnipiac poll that came out over the weekend, can't vouch for the numbers, but it said 51% of the Republicans they surveyed considered the media the enemy. Do you share that? But it sounds funny until the freedoms you give away end up being your own. You're an avid supporter of the Second Amendment. What would you say to President Trump, to those who continue to assail First Amendment freedoms?
Well, I like the members.
You agree with that?
I like the members of the media who are gators like you. look,
It's a serious topic that a lot of people in this country are talking about right now. You spoke passionately about the Second Amendment. What do you say in support of the First Amendment?
I support the First
But
Amendment,
beyond
and I put
supporting
myself in positions with the media. I don't duck the media. I have town hall meetings. I'm open. I'm accessible. I don't, look, I understand that this is a, this is a full contact sport. And if you can't show up and answer tough questions from members of the media, how are you going to lead the third largest state in America?
Do you worry that President Trump is diminishing faith in institutions like that generally with the continued cry of fake news? How worried are you about that?
I don't lose a lot of sleep worrying about that. That's not number one on my concerns about the future of America. I support an awful lot of what President Trump has done. We've talked about what he's done on our trade. I was glad to have the tax cuts that he gave back to this country that are continuing to push our economy forward and be competitive. And I think when you see what you saw at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, you can understand why he's not too happy about the media, because they went way past news and started bullying one of his staff members in a highly inappropriate way.
And should note, whatever people may think about that a number of the members of the media who've had contentious relations with the president were the first who went up to her and said they thought that went too far. So let's add that piece of balance to that.
Well, the White House Correspondents Association expressed their regret that it happened. That's like when a politician gets caught doing something. They don't apologize, they express regret that they got caught.
Well, no,
that's exactly what the press statement sounded like.
Actually, some of them went up directly to her. Let's talk on two other issues, if we can, because we're going to get to student questions and audience questions. You talked about water being a vital resource. We had 2 years ago the algae crisis on the Treasure Coast. A big cry on our Treasure Coast, please send the water south. And a reservoir under Senator Joe Negron's leadership is now in the works. And yet you had been on record before saying you didn't support the reservoir. You've been criticized by some of your opponents, including Ron DeSantis, and we'll speak about that a little bit more in a moment, who says you're in the pocket of big sugar with donations, did not support the reservoir to send water south. And yet environmentalists say sending water south is vital to the very clean water you speak of.
So I'm a strong supporter of the reservoir as it passed. I think Senator Negron deserves a lot of credit for getting that through. And I think that the final plan is an important piece of Everglades restoration and reducing the flows out to the East Coast and West Coast in a normal year. Now, keep in mind that 2 years ago, if the original footprint for the reservoir had been already constructed and fully functioning, that year you would have reduced discharges by 9 days, because that's how much rainfall was coming into that system. So there is no pixie dust. We've got 21 million people living on this peninsula. You've got water that flows from Orlando, basically from everything south of Disney into the lake, and it flows into the lake at 4 times the rate that it can go anywhere. Mm-hmm. You've got a dike around Lake Okeechobee that was built after one of the deadliest natural disasters in U.S. history that's basically a pile of dirt. That's the technology behind it. The Corps of Engineers has to fix that. And the state is doing its part. Governor Scott's been extraordinary about putting another $50 million into that. There's land on the east side and the west side, C-43 and C-44, that was purchased under the Jeb Bush administration, that they're just now moving along on the construction of the C-44. C-43 is not even there yet. So it's going to take all of us moving forward together with storage north of the lake, storage south of the lake, storage to the east and the west, to protect the golden goose that is water in Florida.
Commissioner, before we move on to some questions from the audience, the critique, though, is speak directly to the critique that's been made that you're not willing to press sugar and other agricultural interests because, as one writer put it, you're in Big Sugar's pocket and are not willing to have the discussions that may need to be had with sugar interests and others south of the lake for that component, finding more storage. How can you do that when you're such a big contributor or benefit so much from contributions from sugar interests. And Congressman DeSantis has brought that up before.
Well, I'm not going to answer his charge. He's not
Well,
even here to
but
levy
you-
it.
but you
So I'll be happy to answer your question, but
What do you say to
I don't know why you get to be his proxy, but here's what I'll say.
Commissioner, you know,
Here's what I'll say.
do you
I am proud to stand up for our businesses in Florida, for our farmers, for our linemen, for our business leaders, for people who build jet engines and build boats, and who grow the food that we eat. We all have to lock arms and move forward together if we're going to save our Everglades and keep Florida special. Now, there are those who think, some of them who even live in entire cities that were built on the Everglades and don't realize it. I guess they don't know why there's a 12-foot berm on each side of the road when they drive to work every day. But all of us have had an impact on our environment by being on a state that was once 60% wetlands. And I support our Glades communities. I support giving them the opportunities to have good jobs and be successful and not have to leave to be able to find a good job. And I think that they're a vital, vibrant part of our economy, and the water that leaves sugar farms is cleaner than the water that comes onto it. And somebody's got to let science back into this conversation. You can be for cleaning up Lake Okeechobee. You can be for saving the Everglades. You can be for a strong economy. But all of us have to get out of the habit of thinking that there's just some simple answer of just go take out the bad guys and everything else is going to be fine. We're going to undo 150 years of dredge and fill and Hamilton-Dixon and connecting a river from the Gulf of Mexico that didn't even used to be attached to Lake Okeechobee. But we dug it. And the Corps of Engineers thought it was a great idea to straighten out the Kissimmee River before they decided that it was a terrible idea. They thought it was a great idea to build a cross-Florida barge canal before they decided that maybe it wasn't such a hot-sea idea. So we all have to, I think, get out of this habit that there's black hats and white hats and we're just going to be able to move forward. I think a real responsible leader puts people around the table and comes up with the right solutions for us to move forward as a state to build the kind of Florida that we want to be proud for our grandchildren to inherit.
And Commissioner, and since we've mentioned him without mentioning him, Congressman DeSantis has the support of President Trump. To DeSantis supporters who may be in this room, what would you say to them? What would you say to him if he was sitting here right now today? About why you versus DeSantis when it comes time to make that choice.
Look, I don't begrudge him that. He's, I think he's been supportive of the agenda in Washington, and I'm focused on Florida. I mean, Washington's not going to fix Florida's problems. And you can't run for governor from a DC-based studio. You better be willing to get out amongst the people whose votes you're asking for and look them in the eye and tell them your vision for Florida. Tell them what you're going to do for education. Tell them what you're going to do for workforce development. Bring them in so that we can all move forward together. I don't want the politics of Washington to contaminate our state. I think that we know that the progress we've made in Florida has, in many cases, been kind of in spite of the climate in Washington. I mean, that's why I got out with my soul and my sanity still intact, because Florida is where you can make a difference. And our founders had it right. The states are the laboratories of democracy.
Let's move on to student and audience questions, Commissioner.
If you have questions and you'd like to have Commissioner Putnam answer them, please hold your cards in the air, and our volunteers will come and pick those up. And Commissioner Putnam, as you know, our students asked the first questions. To kick it off, if we could have Glades Central Community High School stand and introduce yourself and ask your question.
Go Raiders.
Hello everyone, my name is John Mosqueda and I am from Glades Central Community High School, and our question would be, what factors do you think can be attributed to explain why more than 30 Republican congressmen have already chosen not to seek re-election this November?
Wow, what a good question. I don't have any idea. Maybe they got smart like I did and said the state's the place where you can make an impact. It's a tough climate up there. It's dysfunctional. It's frustrating. It's hard on the family. And when I made the decision to leave Washington, it was because I knew that I could make a bigger difference for my community and for my kids' future and for the state that I love and I want the sixth generation of Putnams to grow up in. And there were times when I just woke up every day in Washington and thought, man, I'm just beating my head against a wall. And here, even as agriculture commissioner, and there weren't a lot of people who thought that, moving from Congress to agriculture commissioner was moving up the glamour ladder. But I look at what we've accomplished for our veterans with Operation Outdoor Freedom and serving nearly 4,000 of them, including 11 Congressional Medal of Honor recipients. I look at what we've accomplished for school nutrition by working with United Way and Boys and Girls Clubs to expand the fresh fruits and vegetables in our schools by 42% and the access to it by students by 42% rather than using our schools as a dumping ground for what the prisoners won't eat. I look at the things that we've accomplished for the state's water policy, of having a comprehensive statewide water policy where we're making real investments in conservation. And I think, frankly, we need to do more. I think the fact that last year Florida Forever got 0 was embarrassing. I think the fact that our program, Rural and Family Lands, where we buy development rights so that we keep open space and water recharge and wildlife corridors, I think it needs to be invested in. So maybe some of those 30 incumbents have decided that they're better suited to make an impact back home in Florida, and that's the decision I came to.
I'm Colton Derochet with Glades Day School, and our question to you is, what is the most significant policy issue that you changed your mind on?
Wow. I would answer that by saying this. I have, when I first began, I didn't have school-age children. In fact, when I first was elected, I didn't have children. And certainly my view on education and workforce development is hugely influenced by seeing how the changes that we've made in education since I was in school are influencing my own children, my own family. I see the good and the bad. So, for example, when we were all in school, summer school was a bad thing, right? Like, it was punishment to go to summer school. With technology and with Florida Virtual School, it's transforming kids' abilities to get ahead and get stuff out of the way like we used to do in college. So last 2 summers ago, we were at the beach, and I noticed that the kids that my kids were playing with had a brand new puppy, and the puppy was wearing a Fitbit. And I thought that was a little weird. So I asked my daughter, why is your friend's puppy wearing a Fitbit? She said, oh, she's taking PE online through Florida Virtual School, and she's behind in her steps. So technology's changing everything, and then that little girl's going to do just fine in life, by the way. She's a problem solver. But I also see some of the foolish things that we do. And I think back to last spring, almost exactly this time last year, when my son had taken Florida Rights. It's a big exam, it's an important test. And I asked him how he did. He said, I think I did good. It was a fascinating topic. He said it was all about whether or not we should keep or get rid of the penny. I had to read an article and then write an essay on whether I agreed or disagreed with getting rid of the penny. He said, did you know that it costs more than a penny to make a penny? And I said, that's only one of many dumb things that we do in Washington. And anyway, he was just lit up about it. So the next day, separate and apart from that, I was touring a different school, and I thanked the principal for giving me the tour, given that they'd had a stressful week. And she said, well, how'd you know about our stressful week? I said, well, my son told me all about it. You had Florida Rights yesterday. And she said, well, what did he tell you? And I said, well, he told me all about it. He said it was about, whether we should keep or get rid of the penny. And she said, Mr. Putnam, he was not supposed to talk about that with you. And I thought, well, I'm kind of a smart aleck. I said, well, are you going to withhold his 5th grade diploma? And she said, Mr. Putnam, I am serious. He signed something that he would not discuss the content of that examination. And I said, he's 11. He can't remember to take a bath if his mother doesn't remind him. You think he remembers that he said he wasn't going to tell his dad what the topic of the test was? That's crazy, and we're going to get rid of dumb barriers that stand between a student and their parent on something so important as the Florida Rights exam. So I would say to you that I continue to evolve in terms of how we need to prepare you and your classmates for the rapidly changing, confusing, stressful world that you're about to graduate into, and make sure that we've given you every chance in the world to succeed, not just to be able to compete in the global economy, but to win. And that's what we're focused on.
Okay. Governor Scott recently signed a beach access bill limiting access to what is considered private beaches. How do you feel about the law, and do you think it's right?
Well, I would say, you can write this down. I usually don't quote PolitiFact, but they rated that today, that the basis of that question was not correct. It was mostly false. The bill created a process for local governments to litigate what is and what is not customary use. And it is the result of litigation that came out of some panhandle communities, specifically in Walton County. Look, our beaches they define who we are as a state, and they are a public treasure, and I firmly support that. There are instances where local government is taking actions that are going to have to go through this new process to make sure that the public can be heard, and you're not going to see wide swaths of beach closed off to the public, nor should we. It is a public treasure.
Okay. What is your strategy to gain support of the African American community?
First of all, my strategy is to get as many votes from as many people as I possibly can, and I believe that, and I mentioned this in my remarks, we want all of our kids to have the opportunity to be successful and find good jobs without having to move away. That's as resonant in Riviera Beach or in Hialeah as it is in Belle Glade or Pahokee. Whether it's rural economic development or inner city development, rebuilding the middle class is good for everybody. It's good for every demographic and every community of every size throughout our state. Now, I also believe we have to recognize the diversity of Florida. And that means spending time in all of our communities, not just trying to dial in a campaign from some TV studio. That's why I've been to 3 of the 4 historically black colleges and universities in Florida, and we've got the 4th one scheduled, because I think it's important that we understand how we give them the tools to be successful, because those are the leaders who we want to stay in Florida and help us build a stronger, better state. That's why I've had roundtables with the pastoral community in Little Haiti. That's why we're spending time with the Puerto Rican community in Osceola County, where we've seen tens of thousands of individuals come to Florida because they found a warm welcome after their island was devastated by Hurricane Maria. We live in one of the most diverse states in the country. And as governor, you have to be prepared to lead everyone, because at the end of the day, we're all in this together. And that's another reason why I'm against this cookie-cutter approach, particularly to education policy. We're in one of the larger school districts in the country. Miami-Dade's the 5th largest school district in the country. But you know, last week I was in Hamilton County and Union County. Hamilton County has 2 schools in the entire county. Union County has 3, 1 elementary, 1 middle, 1 high school. Do you think that a cookie-cutter approach to education out of Washington or Tallahassee is going to serve the same needs of students in Hamilton County with 2 schools as it is in Miami-Dade with the 5th largest district in the country? Of course not. So we have to understand our state. And I'm the candidate running for governor who knows every corner of our state and will always put Florida first.
What's your plan to address healthcare disparities suffered by Florida's seniors, minorities, and low-income population?
Well, the key to improving health care is to have prevention and treatment strategies that are in every community. And so think back to when I took over the school nutrition program, we were focused on where are the food deserts? Well, the places that don't have a grocery store also are the least likely to have a doctor's office. I mean, we have the GIS technology. We know the pockets of Florida that need the most help. And we can direct that more wisely. The way that we get our healthcare outcomes improved, in part, is to help moms with prenatal care. I mean, the more that we can do early on is going to help that baby be born with fewer issues in a healthier state, ready to learn. The second piece of that is early learning. I mean, we are, in many cases, way behind the curve, and I learned this being married to a kindergarten teacher. I mean, the disparity in where a 5-year-old is compared to their classmates when they show up on the front door in August for the first day of kindergarten is striking. And that's why early childhood and VPK are going to continue to be an important part of that, because education and healthcare outcomes are very much correlated. And third, having a strong economy. You can't solve any of these issues if you don't have people with jobs who are creating the revenues for us to fix these things. People talk about Medicaid as if it's someone's goal to be on Medicaid. That's not someone's goal to be on Medicaid. The goal is to have a job that pays sufficient and offers benefits so that you've got access to health care that's far better than what you're going to get if you're on Medicaid. So I think that those factors, the education piece, the prenatal piece, the early learning piece, the nutrition piece, and having a strong economy allow us to raise our healthcare outcomes for all populations.
So the final question we have for you, what's the kindest thing anyone has done for you in your career?
Wow. People have done a lot of nice things for me. I've been very blessed. The kindest thing that anyone has ever done for me. You know, I'll have to think about that one. I think about the kindness that people have shown my family on, when I was in Florida with the president on 9/11. I think about the kindness people showed when we lost my brother to cancer. Look, I think this is a good problem to have, that I can't think of this, because despite what a lot of people think about politics, most people are really nice. And most people are really nice to people in public life. And most people recognize that people are in it for the right reasons. And we live in a kind place in Florida. People are generally happy to be here, right? This isn't like running for governor of Kansas. So I would say that I have been awash in kindness and blessings from people who pray for me, look out for my family, keep us in their prayers, and keep us safe. And so we're all lucky to live in a state where the vast majority of our neighbors would come out in the middle of the night if we called them and we had a flat tire. That's our community. That's your county. That's our state. And that's why we all call it home. And for many of us, we're Floridians by choice. I didn't have a choice. I've like 5 generations, but most of us chose to be here. And it's because it's a kind place and a warm and welcoming state.
The Kansas delegation in the corner would like to meet with you.
Yeah.
With the Q&A complete, we'd like to thank Michael Williams and Commissioner Putnam for joining us here today. And we'll see everyone for our next event, May 14th, for Chris Matthews.